Hi, this is Lou Pulsfer, and I'm going to talk briefly about the time when you're conceiving a game and what you need to do to recognize that a game is concrete and not nebulous. Now, I've talked about the process of game design in other videos. I've talked about the 10 fundamental structures of games, but I want to focus on one thing here. When you create a game, you need to conceive a game, not an idea, not a story, not a platform, not a marketing scheme. And a game consists of mechanics, even though that's not the ultimate goal of the game at all. But if a game has no mechanics, there is no game. Yes, what's most important in a game is not the mechanics, but the impression your game makes when people play it. The game itself, though, is a set of mechanics and rules. In a tabletop game, the rules describe and exactly specify the mechanics, and then the players have to enforce those mechanics. In a video game, the programmers have to write software that enforces those mechanics. In a video game, the rules are not seen by the players, the rules are actually seen by the programmers, who then translate that into software. And in a tabletop game, the rule books include other things that don't specify mechanics, but always at the root there are mechanics, how the game works. And if you don't have mechanics, you don't have a game. Nonetheless, many people refer to the MDA in games, mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics. Game mechanics combine with the actions of the player or players to create the dynamics. And the dynamics then have an effect on the player or players. In MDA, this is called aesthetics. I much prefer the word impression because I think that's much clearer as to what's actually happening. The game makes an impression on the players, and that's what really counts about the game, is how the players are affected. And of course, that's going to vary from player to player and from time to time, and you have a target market, and those are the people that you want to make a particularly good impression upon. Because a game is a means, not an end. It's a means to cause something to happen, not an end in itself. And that's something that happens is the impression it makes on the players. In a tabletop game, that's through the mechanics and the appearance and the feel, the tactile feel of the game. If it's video, you don't have the tactile feel, but you have sound. But you don't have a game unless you have a set of mechanics. You can imagine the impressions you want to make on people. You can imagine what story you want to tell. But those are goals, not means, and the trick is to get the game to cause that to happen. It's like writing a novel. You can have wonderful ideas about the impression you want to make on a reader, but if you can't write the novel to do it, then you have failed. And it's the same in games. If you can't devise a game that makes the impression you want on the player, you have failed. Games are always a means to some end or ends, whether it's entertainment or education, making a political point, advertising, something. The game is a means to an end. Now there's a lot more to it than this, but you have to start with the idea that you need concreteness, you need a game, you need mechanics. You'll need to make those mechanics work well with one another for some purpose, even though the ultimate goal of the game is that other purpose and not the mechanics. Once you think you've got something like that, you can go to my 10 fundamental structures and see that you are covering all the bases. And there are more questions than that, of course, but that's outside the scope of this particular video. It's kind of a paradox. You have to devise mechanics to make the game work and work well, but what you're ultimately interested in, or should be, is the effect that the game has on the players. Thanks for listening.